Hi, I'm Mark Vernarelli, and welcome to Inside Harford County, a program where we sit down with our community leaders and discuss the issues important to the citizens of Harford County. Harford County's budget for fiscal year 2026 has just been announced, and today we're going to take a closer look at exactly where the money comes from and where it goes. And joining us today in the studio, County Executive Bob Cassilly and Harford County Treasurer Robbie Sandlass. Gentlemen, welcome. First of all, congratulations for being 1,000 times smarter than I am to be able to deal with this budget thing. I hear the word budget and I go to pieces, and you guys are responsible for over $1 billion, which is really, and especially in these times, it's got to be a real challenge.
Good to see you, Mark.
Great to have you both here today. Mr. County Executive, let's talk about the state budget.
Sure.
The legislature just wrapped up. The state budget certainly has an impact on the county budget.
Absolutely.
How is that working out so far? How does it look?
Yeah, well, so the states finished their budget, although they're looking at a special session, so we're not really sure the full impact of the state budget, but they passed theirs before they concluded their legislative session about a week or so ago, and now our budget goes in right after that. So the state budget impacted us pretty substantially this year. In the one hand, they shift a lot of expenses to the counties. So Harford, as all the other counties, they shifted hundreds of millions of dollars onto the counties. For Harford, that's about $6.2 million, where things that the state has traditionally funded, like teachers' pensions, well, they put a big chunk of that onto the counties, community college pensions, and the like, and other expenses, State Department assessments and taxation, operating fees, and the like. So that set us back $6.2 million. Boom, find out about that. Well into the process of drafting our own budget, we had to accommodate. The other piece of that is that the state just cut back on what they're spending. So, you know, major things like our highway user revenue, which is, well, the gas tax, and how much we're going to get for the gas tax, monies that we would normally get for dredging waterways, and many other things that the state would usually cover, that if they're not going to cover a piece of it, impacts on what we're able to do. So yeah, the state, and look, the bigger picture is their budget impacts us because as they raise tax rates throughout the state, that's going to, it doesn't hurt us necessarily right away this year, but come in the long term, it's not good for business. And as businesses and high income taxpayers decide to exit a state with high taxes, well, that's going to have reverberations into future tax years. So, but for this year, those are what hit us.
You came in 2 years ago worried about dire predictions of fiscal problems. You wanted fiscal responsibility on the county level, and you wanted no tax increases. But you were facing a lot of challenges back then. Remind us about how that started.
Yeah, so we rolled into office, and with Robbie's excellent advice, we recognized that we had a $90 million structural deficit, which means we were spending more than we were taking in. And another big piece was that all the federal stimulus money, the federal COVID money was gone. And so we hit folks who we were funding who were used to the sugar high of federal stimulus spending and federal COVID money. We roll in and say, all that money is gone. So now it's time to really exercise fiscal prudence. The other piece that hit us was that our volunteer ambulance service was folding. And so we had to stand up a county-run ambulance service fairly quickly. So those are some of the really big things that caused us to have to make some really tough decisions. And fiscal, responsibility, fiscal prudence weren't just buzzwords; they were actually essential to continuing to operate our county effectively. So we made those tough decisions. We reined in spending. We found efficiencies, and really stuck to funding the essentials without increasing taxes. There was a lot of hue and cry to, hey, keep spending going, keep the faucets open. We took a lot of grief, a lot of head smashing to folks who wanted to keep the spending rolling, but we held firm on principles of responsible fiscal management, and that's put us in a good position today.
What's the big picture of the 2026 budget?
So yeah, I mean, on the big picture, look, we don't have any tax increases. That's the big piece. We're putting record spending by fully funding the school board's operating budget. That's a big piece. We're funding salary increases for our sheriff's deputies and correctional officers that match the sheriff's pay study from 2022. So the numbers they pegged, we're matching those. We're the unexpected cost that the state hit us with $6.2 million. We're nailing that one. We're good on that. And we're going to be able to continue reducing our structural deficit and put money towards that as well. So on the big picture, look, this is good. We've done well. The big picture things are meeting our targets, but that's because we made the hard choices earlier on. And by doing that, we're in a good position today.
Robbie, on the national level, things are moving at an absolutely dizzying pace. We have inflation, the tariff discussions and things going back and forth. That has to trickle down eventually. What do you see on the national level, how it affects us at the down here at the county level?
Well, probably the biggest component of that is going to be the reduction in the federal workforce. Moody's, which is one of the credit rating analysis shops, put out a study a few months ago saying that no other state in the union is as dependent on the federal workforce as is Maryland. So that includes both your direct federal workers and then also your contractors or NGOs or all the types of things that are somewhat government adjacent. And the way that the income tax works, both at the state level and at the local level, is it depends on where you live. And to the extent that those positions are either eliminated or maybe they're transferred to other states or things like that, Maryland and then by extension Harford County would see a kind of reduction in our taxable income. So that's been like the biggest concern of trying to get a handle on this. Now, from what we understand, the Department of Defense, I'm not going to say that they're going to be immune to it, but they might take less of a hit than some of the more civilian shops. But even with the way that the distribution of the income tax works in Maryland, it's going to take us a long time to kind of figure out exactly how that is. So it's probably all the more important reasons to try to be conservative on our budgeting approach and make sure we have those adequate reserves.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how do you even figure out, generally how things are trending, but it's hard to pinpoint exactly how much of an impact it's going to have at this point, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things, that great line from the former Howard County executive, Chuck Ecker, that, we know that our estimates are wrong, we just don't know by how much. And so that's, we know we're not going to hit it. We know we're not going to, we don't know. There's so many individual actors going on. What are capital gains doing? Increasingly now, a lot of your income tax is driven by your higher earners. And sometimes, they don't always work in concert with the economy. They might be making financial planning decisions for their estates or things like this. And so I think that's why you try to look at your trend analysis. We have a spending affordability committee here in the county that's made up of a lot of our key business leaders. And we try to strike that balance. We look at the data, but then we also take on the anecdotal information to say, how do we think this is going to shake out? Because what we generally don't want to have is it's okay. Like if we are underestimated, you don't want to be dramatically underestimated for revenue, but it's not as if we lose that money. It'll fall to our fund balance. We can spend it another day. But if you underestimate, now you have a mid-year problem, and with the way that the funding works with, say, the school system and some of the other entities, once we determine this is the amount we're giving to the schools, that's more or less set for the year. So if by the time we figure out that the economy is struggling and income tax is down or other revenues are down, it might very well be February, March, this time of the year, and we have to have a balanced budget, by the end of June 30th. So there's a very short window then for making any type of corrective actions.
Yeah, when you talk about revenue, you used to have solid sources. You knew how much was coming in. It's kind of a time in flux right now. You really don't know what you're going to have. Yep. Is that a little unnerving, Mr. County Executive?
Well, yeah, and I have to tell you, I give Robbie and his crew a lot of credit for being pretty darn accurate. My first year in, when they started releasing their revenue estimates, we got beat about the head and shoulders by folks saying, "You don't know what you're doing. You're grossly underestimating revenue estimates. You need to keep the spending spigots on and spend. We held our line, and they were grossly wrong, and the revenue estimates were pretty darn close to what actually came in. But yeah, this is tough stuff.
Really tough. Highways and water and sewer are kind of outliers. They're different in the revenue sense. Robbie, talk about how they differ in terms of money coming in for fund the highways and the water and sewer. So
in Harford County, all of our road maintenance, snow plowing, all of that is actually part of a separate budget. It's not part of our general fund. It's part of our highways fund. And the way that we fund it primarily is with a property tax that we assess on those properties that are outside of our 3 municipalities. And the thinking there is that the county maintains the roads that are outside of the municipalities. These are, the Grafton shops and the wheel roads and those types of roads. Whereas if you're in the town of Bel Air, Havre de Grace, or Aberdeen, their own respective taxes pay for it. Now, years ago, the state provided a lot of highway user revenue to the counties to to maintain our roads. We have over 1,000 miles of roads. We have more than 200 bridges. And the state, through gas tax and vehicle registration, would share a significant portion of that, about 30% with the counties. That's been dramatically reduced. That was actually reduced about 15 years ago. So now most of that responsibility lies with, again, on that property tax side. And the state is maintaining those revenues largely to pay for your larger state projects, which would include both, your big road projects, but also your transit projects, things like the Purple Line, the Red Line, things along those lines. And so that's kind of an unfortunate shift. Maryland is a very unique state in that we don't have, the ability to raise our own gas tax or things like that at the local level. So it falls on our local property owners to maintain those roads.
We've talked about where the money comes from, Mr. County Executive. Let's talk now about where the money goes. And you talk about going back 2 years, you knew that you would have to tighten the belt.
Yeah.
How did you reduce costs when you came in, and did that work out the way you hoped?
Well, I'm just on the bigger picture. Our overall operating budget this year increases about 4.8%. So that's the first real increase in 2 years, which is consistent with we've been holding the line. So this year we finally undid the belt a little bit to try to go back to pick up some things that we've been cutting. But the approach we followed just shows that we can live within our means. And it's really not living with our means, it's with the taxpayers' means. So and just reducing our reliance on savings and maintaining our AAA bond rating. But the areas where we really cut were things like we basically froze a lot of our departmental budgets and just say, hey, we're going to live within our means. We did an early retirement buyout from some of our senior employees to reduce those costs. We did a lot of efficiencies. We took leases that and basically combined, move folks into together a little tighter, and got rid of some lease spaces, cut some line items within the budget. We did a retirement incentive. I mentioned. We also just improving government operations. We redid how we're doing contracts, how we're purchasing items, with a real focus on efficiencies. We looked at how we're doing healthcare to reduce some of our expenses in healthcare and drug-related costs. So it was a pretty concerted effort across the entire government that I control. And I don't control the sheriff or the Board of Education, but the stuff that we actually control the operations of. We really did a concerted effort to look at efficiencies and stuck to that pretty hard.
You touched on it a little bit earlier, but talk again a little bit more detail about the budget increases, the major areas where you're seeing increases.
Yeah. So I guess our top priorities continue to be public safety, right, and then followed by the schools. Consistent with that top priority of public safety, we provided our salary increases for law enforcement. This is about being a law enforcement officer that's a rather expensive proposition these days. You pay for what you get. We have very good law enforcement officers, and we got to pay them so we can maintain those good law enforcement officers. So it's about a 6% increase for our uniformed law enforcement officers. That's a 3% COLA and a step for those eligible employees. And that pay matches the salary study that the sheriff had commissioned back in 22. We did that brings our average deputy salary to $106,000 a year, not including their overtime. We also did salary increases for our state's attorneys, our prosecutors, who just recently were very successful in the Morin prosecution. So we provided substantial salary increases for them, and we picked up additional 2 body-worn camera technicians for the state's attorney's office. We're continuing to staff our 17 ambulance crews countywide, providing additional funding for them for some bonuses. And that's working out great because our response times continue to fall, and we're saving lives every day. So public safety is top priority, and that's where we emphasize our spending.
And schools and education, it takes a huge chunk of the budget.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about the importance of that.
Yeah.
And it's a huge percentage of our taxes go toward schools and education.
So look, I'm a graduate of public schools, as is my wife, our children, and most of my siblings. So the schools are near and dear to my heart. I'm in them fairly frequently. I was in them this morning, in fact. So that's the biggest chunk of our general revenue is going towards those schools. And we work really closely really from the day after we passed the last budget last year with the superintendent and his staff, with the Board of Education, to really try to understand each other's, how much revenue have I got? What are your needs? Trying to align revenue with needs. As a result of that collaboration, that hard work by both of us, we're fully funding the superintendent's $347 million operating budget, which is a $26 million increase over last year, which is $27.3 million above, a lot of folks do the maintenance of effort. So we're about $27.3 million over the maintenance of effort requirement, what we're funding this year. And we're going to continue to work together with the board on cost savings and efficiencies. We collaborate on a number of things. And it's just part of a long-term effort to align the education budget growth with our tax revenue growth. We got to have those aligned, and we're coming much better. But the budget also includes, we got new funding for a new Harford Academy, which is a combined dual elementary school, major repairs to a number of our school buildings like C. Milton Wright, North Harford, and a few others, Harford Tech, for some badly needed upgrades. So a real strong commitment to education. I'm proud of that. Our schools are our future. They're our children, so that deserves the money they get.
An extension to that question would be, how about libraries and our crown jewel, Harford Community College?
Sure.
What goes to them?
So libraries, again, a 3% increase. They continue to be a favorite amongst folks. The community college, so their operating budget doesn't go up, but we're providing substantial funding, about $9 million to them for we're looking at they're going to be putting in a new workforce development center, and so we're contributing that in exchange for which they're going to use some of their fund balance. They have a pretty substantial fund balance. They'll put those additional funds towards their operating expenses, but yeah, it's an incredible organization that we want to continue to support. The county's very proud of that. Our health department, we increased their funding by 3%. They do an important job for folks. Humane Society, we increased by $1.3 million. It's about 13% increase for dealing with all the animal issues that are going on out there.
Robbie, how about the capital projects? When you come in, like 2 years ago, when you all were getting together for the first couple times, did you look ahead to capital projects that you knew had to be done, since they're such a huge chunk of money?
Yeah, so the county looks at their capital plan, but not just in the current year, but we do a six-year capital plan, because we certainly understand that these projects are going to take a while to develop, to build. They're oftentimes debt financed. We finance those with bonds. But one of the things I think we took particular interest in was looking at the operating impacts. A lot of times it's the groundbreaking and the ribbon cuttings and all are great, but the real cost oftentimes for a lot of the capital projects is on, once they're operational. You have to heat and cool them, you have to staff them, and then of course you're paying that debt service back, you're paying that bond back over 20 years. And all that comes out of your operating budget. So, it's always good to recognize that these two budgets do kind of work hand in hand. And really, today's capital budget is tomorrow's operating budget.
Yeah. Now, what projects do we have aside from schools? We've talked about the schools. What capital projects are you excited about that we have coming up?
Well, again, I think one of the big things that we try to do in Harford County is maintain our existing facilities. And those aren't glamorous projects, but we're staying on top of the roofs and the HVACs and the road maintenance and the bridge maintenance and all. And I know that's a big point that we always make with the credit rating agencies each year, is that we don't neglect the stuff that we already own. So from a government finance perspective, that's always one of my key areas. Overall, what we've been trying to do is to keep our bonding to around $100 million a year, with about $50 million of it for the schools and $50 million of it for all the other stuff, because we have to live within our debt affordability guidelines, so that we don't become overextended.
How about road repairs? Everybody who has to use public transit or drive is always mindful of the condition of the roads. That's a big one for you, isn't it, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Robbie's point on the capital improvement for, bridges are expensive, roadways are really expensive. So we continue to invest in our highways. About $35 million total in highway capital projects are included in the budget, which includes $5 million for just widening roadways, $6 million for what we call the Woodley Road Extended, which a lot of folks have heard about the issue with all the tractor trailers cutting through the town of Perryman, and Woodley Road is the bypass to take them around Perryman. So we got $6 million to complete that. And then we've got another $2.5 million for critical infrastructure, intersections, improvements. We've seen some really horrible accidents over the years, and we're investing in those, even those that are on state highways that are really the state responsibility, but the state's not funding us, so we will, like what you're seeing at Grafton Shop in Maryland 23. State responsibility, county stepping in. State says we can't pay for it. We're like, well, it's too dangerous. We'll go ahead and pick it up. Oh, and some county things like Bel Air South Parkway and Blue Spruce, put a traffic circle in there. Aldino Stepney at Maryland 7, again a state road, but we're stepping in. Maryland 147 at Maryland 152. So we're stepping in. We're going to make some improvements here because our citizens' lives merit this additional investment, particularly these critical intersections that are dangerous. So,
Robbie, the budget process is something that a lot of regular folks like us don't really understand. When the county executive comes out with his budget, where does it go from there? What happens after that?
Well, the budget becomes effective on July 1. So at this point, the county executive comes out with his budget on April 15th. And actually, that process really started almost 6 months, 6, 7, 8 months before that, with all the analysis and the request and all the like. But at this point now, it becomes kind of the county council's show. And they will have up until June 15th to adopt the budget, and then once they do adopt the budget, it becomes effective on July 1. So they'll have budget work sessions. They'll have public hearings to both ask questions of the directors and all the outside agencies, as well as their citizen budget advisors. And then the public will also have 2 opportunities to weigh in as well. Of course, the county provided an opportunity for the citizens to weigh in kind of before we got our project underway back in January, so that we could take those opinions and those thoughts into our decisions.
Mr. Cassilly, it has to be probably one of the biggest burdens, the budget, isn't it? What do you, when you sat down at first, every year to go over this, does it overwhelm you a little bit just to look at the amount of money?
Yeah, it's big, but I tell you what we do is it is a heavy lift. I have a budget team. Robbie's part of that. We meet 2 to 3 times a week throughout the entire year. Really, we'll pick back up once this budget's done, and in June we'll start right back in, and we start off, big picture, and then start looking at every little piece. And every week we go through this. It's so much to do, and to do it right. And so so how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Mm-hmm. We do it one bite at a time, several bites a week, and take on issues and address them. So it's that's the major thing that government does is to allocate those fundings out to just provide what the public needs.
I wouldn't imagine there are many surprises, so to speak, but were there any wrinkles this year that maybe you didn't anticipate fully until you looked at the numbers more closely?
The state impact was the big piece. We knew going in that we had to do something for county employees. We kept their benefits kind of lower on the scale as we struggled with the initial. My promise to county employees was, look, I'm not going to do furloughs. All this economic turmoil, we're going to find this. We're not going to do layoffs. We're going to do what we've got to do. So we knew we had that piece, but the state budget was the biggest challenge. And when we got, hey, here's $6.2 million, which in this on the overall budget, that's not the biggest piece, but recognizing so much of our budget is fixed cost. I mean, it's employee salaries by and large for the teachers and the sheriff deputies and the like. So when you start looking at $6.2 million, that's we're talking the discretionary piece here, where we're actually getting some good stuff done. And when you say, well, let's just take $6.2 million out of it, that's a headshot where you really got to react and step back and look at it, and then looking at the tax increases and recognizing the impact that's going to likely have on operations going forward.
Robbie, I'm fascinated by people like you who are smart with numbers, because I'm not. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up as a treasurer for Harford County.
Well, I'm like the county executive, a graduate of Bel Air High School, and then went here to Harford Community College. I have a bachelor's in economics from Hampton-Sydney and a master's in public administration from the University of Baltimore. And got my start really in the budget and finance world in Carroll County. I was the former budget chief, and then also worked a little bit in the Baltimore County Auditor's Office, and so was able to then kind of come back home here to Harford County, and more or less came from the budget side, and then now part of both the budget and the finance side.
So you have quite a background to be able to cover all the bases.
Yeah.
Sir, you talked a little bit about the it's not just numbers, it's people.
Yeah.
And you, with your generations of Cassillys in Harford County, you're very aware of the so-called people impact that every dollar has.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And look, I have great confidence in Robbie. He does an excellent job for Harford County, but it does impact people. You look at look, our volunteer firefighters who go out and do a whole lot of work every day, and just showing support and appreciation for what they do. That was a big part of our effort, was to meet all their expenses and make sure that we were providing them with the money that they need. But it goes beyond to either the senior population who relies upon county government for a lot of services, and from transportation to some of their food needs and the like, and your kids throughout the county for the parks and rec needs and those programs that are so important. Our farmers and the support we can provide to them that's really essential for their operations. So it's really across the county. What we do impacts a lot of lives every day. I just think how when you wake up in the morning and how many times county government impacts your life, from the time you turn on the sink to wash, brush your teeth and flush your toilet, and then step on your sidewalks. These are all county tax dollars at work. The public street you just drove out on. So before you've even gotten to the end of your block, your life is so impacted by county expenditures and what we're doing, and to have the emergency services there to supply you and your neighbors with the ambulances and the police support. It's pretty intense, and the impacts every child sees from Parks and Rec through their schools and the like. So, it's an awesome responsibility. I have an awesome team that enables me to do this, and I'm really grateful for them and the job they do.
You talk about transparency from day one. You said you want to be transparent. You want the people to know what's going on. How can people keep up with the budget? How can they look at the budget, or perhaps online, for example?
Sure. So the budget's posted. It's on our website. It's an award-winning budget for clarity, transparency, and they can take a look at that. Look up on our www.harfordcountymd.gov. Look at the budgets linked right from the homepage there, and you can go through that, and we're happy to answer citizen questions on the budget, and it's a great tool.
Robbie, are you pleased, despite the tremendous trickle-down challenges from nation to state to county? Are you overall pleased with the way things look at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that we're balancing all of the various needs. I think it's one of the challenges with local government is that everything that we do has this kind of built, kind of has a natural constituency. There isn't a whole lot that we do that you would say, why are you spending on that? But we're able to live within our means. We're able to maintain our reserves, and I think we're well positioned to weather the storm.
Final thoughts, Mr. County Executive.
Yeah, so I want to first thank Robbie and our budget team for a really excellent job of putting this budget together and sending it over to the council. Harford County is a special place, and with strong fiscal management and the help that we receive, we're going to keep it that way. And I just am grateful, so thankful to be able to have the job I have and lead this county every single day, do great stuff for the people.
Thank you both very much for being here today and going over this tremendously important budget.
Thanks, Mark. It's good to see you.
Thank you, sir. And thank you very much for watching Inside Harford County, airing exclusively on HarfordTV. Please join us again next month. I'm Mark Vernarelli.